Well, the idea of the trust came about because a few of us have been involved with, I suppose, what we called the League of Ireland Fans Forum. After Monaghan went out of the league in 2012, I know myself, I was just sort of getting a bit pissed off with how the whole thing is being run. And I mean Irish football in general. It just felt like it was really dwindling away to nothing. And Monaghan, the fact that a club had gone into existence right in the middle of the season, was just another indicator. Just things weren't right. And so what happened was I sort of put up a Facebook group actually, and it ended up having, I think, 1,000 members. Now, of course, the idea was just sort of talk about fans' representation in the league and what we might be able to do. And I think maybe only 12 people turned up, but one of those people we got involved in was Niamh Mahoney from the Foras Trust, obviously, or the trust that run Cork City. And what sort of came out of that then, and we started talking about sort of national representation and this kind of thing and what might happen, was we actually realised that maybe at Shells there was a need for this. There was something there maybe that would help sort of in terms of the future of the club, because obviously it's been pretty bleak for a while. So myself, Martin Gretton and Conor McManus sort of were the initial leading lights, and we got a lot of help from Foras, we got a lot of help from Supporters Direct. We also got a lot of help from FC United of Manchester, who actually sent over someone to talk at that inaugural meeting. And that was kind of it. It was kind of born out of just seeing that we had a lot of challenges at the football club. The future was looking pretty precarious, and if we wanted to do something about it, we'd have to kind of get organised and try and address it in that way. So that's kind of more or less it. Well, it's a pretty long process, and it's a pretty involved one, and that's why some groups decide not to go down the route of actually formally incorporating as a supporters trust. But that was definitely something we were sort of determined to do, and once we knew we got that right, then everything would sort of flow from there. So there's a few steps. So Supporters Direct, you have like a manual which people can look up, and was a really great resource for us. So initially what we did was we sort of held a meeting to sort of get a mandate initially to introduce the concept of a trust to the support group, to start talking about what it was, what it might entail, raise a bit of awareness for it, and then also to have a sort of a vote mandating it, right? Because, democratic values are kind of pretty much at the core of supporters trusts. So getting a mandate to even set it up in the first place is kind of crucial, because, you don't want people you don't want to sort of seem like you have a lack of legitimacy, or you're just doing this because you think it's a good idea. You want to make sure that you have buy-in for a number of fans. So that was the first thing we did, and we held that meeting. And Foras and Supporters Direct were super supportive in that, right down from like talking about like how you might MC an evening, to getting guests. Obviously, Niamh travelled up for it. Philip as well from FC United of Manchester obviously was there as well. And it was just like, it was just that support of getting it together, and we were very lucky in that we got a lot of people there involved. Maybe around, I think it was around 50 or 60. So, which was great to have. And then out of that, we sort of formed a working group, which is sort of a number of Shell supporters, and they acted as sort of a steering committee. So it's not actually the committee of the trust itself, because you haven't quite set up the trust. It's a group of people that have come together and are working on setting it up. So and again, the point of that is not to act without a mandate. Now, obviously, you still need some people to take the lead on things, but they can't do it without sort of buy-in from people. So. That was quite a long process actually. I think it was November when we held the meeting about the mandate, or maybe late October, and it was actually February by the time we got it, sort of formally set up and established. And then we held our first AGM where we sort of elected our first proper committee. A lot of people from the steering committee sort of stayed on. Others unfortunately had to step aside. And that was sort of a long process. Probably the biggest part of it was actually registration, right? Because Supporters Trust and certainly the 1895 Trust is actually a formally established cooperative. It's essentially a company. So just like you would with any other company, you have to nominate directors, you have to file papers, you have to go through a process with the company's registration office, or the Register of Friendly Societies, which is part of that organisation. And that's what we did. And so that then meant that we had our constitution, we had our board of directors, our committee of management, as we call it. And all that, and look, that's a pretty arduous process. People have jobs, people have other things to go on as well, and it is a lot of administration, but it is kind of worth it, because now we're this legally incorporated entity, and we can do things like own shares, or even at some point maybe employ people, or do this kind of thing. So that's the genius of it, and it works for tiny organizations like ours, right up to massive cooperatives. That, I mean, some of the biggest companies in the country are actually cooperatives. large dairy companies and this kind of stuff. So that was kind of what it took. It took a long time, was a lot of effort, but I think it's paying off now. Well, the positives are that you get. Here's my thinking on this, right? A football club is not just a jersey. It's not just a company. It's not just even the team that's on the pitch. A football club is actually a set of beliefs amongst a group of people, right? And so long as there are Shells fans, there will be a Shelburne. That's it. And actually, the idea of having Shelburne fans is, the club has to, with no Shelburne fans, there's no club. So for me, it legally reflects what is the actual reality of something, right? Like, the heart and soul of, Manchester United isn't contained in the shares of the company that's floating on the stock exchange. It's in the hearts and minds of the people of Manchester. And this comes as close as possible to reflecting that reality, because the people that own the football club are those same people. The people that control the football club are the ones that make it up. And so what that means is you're taking what's a sort of almost a spiritual or a cultural reality and you're translating into a legal one. And what that then means is a number of things that flow out of that, right? So it means that people have a sense of responsibility, I think. Right now, and throughout our history at Shells, we've been run by like a small group of really passionate people, largely small businessmen, people who sort of put in their own time, money and effort to run it. And it's a thankless job for in many cases. And what's happened usually is they can get 10, 20, even 30 years out of it sometimes, but inevitably, there comes a time when their resources, their physical resources, their financial resources, they just aren't there anymore. And unfortunately, that's where we are right now. But with the Supporters Trust, that kind of renews a little bit more, rather than relying on the fan base as well, because it's a two-way process. The fan base relying on a group of people and saying, okay, it's the board's fault or it's the board's problem. There is a sense of responsibility there. It's something we all collectively have, and therefore that we have, responsibility over. I think if you look at, excuse me, if you look at even within our own league, Bows went through some similar issues to us, and they made a lot of mistakes. But now they're one of the reasons why I think they are sort of holding it together is because they have members, who control the club, and the members acknowledge they made a mess up, and it's up to them to kind of get them out of that mess. Whereas I think at Shells, it's a little bit more divided because, you still have a sort of the group of people there that people tend to heap the blame on, and similarly I think that group of people also maybe see some fault with how the fan base is acting too, and whatever the rights and wrongs of that are, that has to be squared off, and you have to have people come together and do it. So for me, that's why a Supporters Trust I think would be important, because it would be up to everybody collectively. Now obviously you still have things like boards, because you still have to have organisation and you still have to have people making decisions, but it's the responsibility of everyone to make sure the club is run in a certain way, and they shape it. And when people shape something, you've got far more of an attachment to it. If somebody else is making decisions about something, you aren't as invested as if you're making the decisions yourself. So I think that's really, for me, the primary benefit. And you can see it. It works with clubs at all levels. It works with clubs that are smaller than ours, and it works with clubs that are way bigger than ours. So I really think that it's something that, over time is really the way to go at the club. Well, I think the short-term goals are pretty simple. It's to keep our membership up, to keep our membership active, to keep engaged with people, and sort of to build coalitions and to really win over people's trust, if I could use that term, that we are, a responsible body. There's been a lot of speculation, a lot of ill feeling from some people, like things like, you're here to change the name of the club, or you're here to set up a new club. Like that's just not the case, And I think we need to do a lot better job, and by we I mean I think the committee of management in particular need to do a better job of demonstrating to people that we only have the best interests of the football club at heart. We're all supporters that have been there a long time. I know myself, I'm a third generation supporter. I can't even tell you what my earliest memory is, because ever since I've had awareness of the world, Shells have been involved, So it's about trying to, let people know that, and one of our big short-term goals is to just get people to buy in, and obviously we'd love people to be members, because I think that's, even if you don't agree with the direction of something, if you're there giving your voice and giving your opinion, that can shape things really, really so much. So I think that's definitely one of our short-term goals, is just to try and keep the trust active, try and keep it credible, and try to keep the membership up and active. The long-term goals, I think it's to have a football club that's, secure, that has a clear future, and for us, we think that comes through the fans owning it, because the reality is there's no private capital or no private investor in the league, much less at Shells, that is going to provide massive amounts of money to get us out of the mess that we're in. It's really going to have to be a roll up the sleeves effort, and it has been so far. But I think that it needs to be done with a view to what comes next, because it's not just about trying to keep it going over a short-term time period. It's also about, where do we take it in 10, 20 years time. So for me, I think that's it. One obviously isn't dependent on the other. I think you have to convince people that you are credible, that you are organised, and that you do the best interest of the club at heart, in the short term. And then that means then that your long-term goals can be more, have a more realistic chance of happening. If you don't focus on trying to get things done in the here and now, the likelihood of people finding your vision of what comes next isn't really credible. So I think for us, that's really where we got to go next. Yeah, I think so, absolutely. If you look at the projects that have been tried in the league, right, like a lot of them were done by sort of pretty strong individuals or companies or organisations, the likes of Kildare, the likes of Sporting Fingal. Even if you look at the likes of Bray as well, a lot of those were like the visions of one or two people, who decided to sort of take it on and just try and do the best of what they could. And unfortunately, if you're not taking the community that's with you around, their considerations into account and trying to get buy-in, you're going to find that maybe people aren't supporting you as much. I think it's also true at some other clubs as well. Maybe some of the more of the pre-existing ones. Obviously, you look at Charmer Grover's history. Maybe their fans weren't listened to, right from when Milltown was sold all the way up to, when the 300 club took over there. And I think it's probably the same at Chels. Now I think at Chels it's slightly different because Ollie in particular had done so much work in taking the club from where it was to being successful, that I think it was very difficult for anyone to brook any dissent or even give any suggestions, and he wasn't a man who particularly valued other people's opinions, it must be said. So I think it's the case at all football clubs, and it's not just here, it's also the case in other places as well. Fans aren't just there as consumers to have the money milked out of them. They're also there as people who are web designers or people with like other skills and people with other like perspectives, and I think any football club that forgets that, I think they're really missing out on something. I think there needs to be more honesty in terms of the league and in terms of what its contribution is. They've released a statement now 2 years in a row which says that the collective losses of the collective losses of the league are tiny. I think they said last year it was like 200,000 or maybe even less than that. And they're using metrics that and using things to describe success that I don't really think ring true. Tenants are still going down. Clubs still look like a lot of them are on the precipice. So I think there needs to be an acknowledgement. That would be the primary thing I think that everybody looks for from the association and from the clubs as well, is the honest acknowledgement and assessment of the situation that we're in. And it is precarious, and it's been like that for a long time. But I think that needs to be where it goes, and rather than going back and forth on what the issues are. I think if you look at the Roddy Collins situation, Roddy has a lot of opinions on different things, but the fact that there was such a vehement reaction to what he said tells you a lot. It's like, to me, it really came down to an issue of like people arguing over whether the league was substandard or substandard, and you're like, it's not really conducive to addressing what the actual issues are. I think everybody, and including the association, and that needs to be a bit more honest about what the problems are and then try to address it. And I think there's been a few good journalists and a few people have argued that there is some very simple things that could be addressed. Things like the suspensions issue, where players are getting suspended and removing a lot of playing time, even though the yellow cards might have occurred last season. That's something that just seems like it makes sense. The entrance fees as well. A lot of people pointed that out. The fact that, I'm not sure what it is for the current season, but for previous seasons, you had to finish, in the top half before the prize money was actually greater than the money it took to actually enter the league. I think it's little things like that. I think if they were to sort of be more honest in terms of where the problems are, and then also start to address the things like that, I think it would start to go a long way towards, getting people on the same page and actually trying to address those issues. Well, I think the best thing people can do with the football club is to just go to the games. I think anyone out there who has any affection towards Chels, should really be, out there and paying in and creating a good atmosphere and do what we can. And I think that's the most crucial aspect of it. And I think also as well, like offering what you can in terms of your skills or that kind of stuff. I think there's always a lot of emphasis placed on money, rightfully so, because you do need money to put people on the pitch and to do all this sort of stuff. But I think that it would be great to see the fans and the club as well acknowledge that there's other little things we can do that maybe don't cost so much money, or if they don't cost much money now, they're an investment for the future. So things like marketing the club a bit better, promoting it, putting it out there in the kind of hearts and minds of people and getting a bit more exposure for it. I think that's really what people can do. And we have fans from all walks of life, and lots of people who work in the media, lots of people who work in business as well, and trying to get all those people on the same page and trying to pull them towards something. I think that has tangible goal. I think that'd be great. I'd also say people should join the trust as well, because I think that's really crucial. Again, even if people disagree with any direction of something, if they're at least there and contributing to it, I think that makes a big difference. Look, my preference is really clear. Like, I think we should have our own stadium. That's the ideal scenario. Whether it be Talca or whether it be a greenfield site or something that makes sense. Something we can call our own. Get into the community about it, and try and promote something and build something. Unfortunately, it looks like the options are pretty limited. We're certainly in the trust where we're going to be holding sort of a survey very soon to get what fans' thoughts are on it. But by and large, what I'm hearing is something similar. I think the ideal scenario is absolutely we have our own place, but the options look like they're pretty slim. The Daly Mount deal, obviously there's some details that are kind of coming out about that now. I think what's really crucial there is making sure that makes sense for, if it is to be a ground share, it makes sense for both clubs. I think if you're putting ourselves in there as the sort of poor stepchild, I don't think that's going to work. And I don't think anybody would be in favour of a situation that is only cosmetically beneficial. It has to have real benefits to it. So for me, again, like I said, I think the ideal scenario is we have our home of our own, something we can call, whether it's even Talca Park in some way, shape or form. But if it is to happen and if it is to go somewhere else, I think those concerns need to be met. I don't think we can be going into a situation where we're a second class in any way. So those are my own personal views, but I think it's now going to be important to get the fan base involved, because we have a lot of talk about the stakeholders, in inverted commas, and right now, because Bohemians are a members club, they can by and large sort of take a temperature of what their members' feelings are. With us, I think it's also important that Shels fans, because at the end of the day, we're going to be the ones that are going to be supporting the club regardless of where it goes, that our feelings are brought to bear, and our concerns are met. I think that's absolutely crucial.